This is the story of how a fleet of unmarked climate-controlled transport trucks idling at the heavily guarded gates of Buckingham Palace became the ultimate symbol of a queen's total financial containment. In less than 48 hours, what was supposed to be a quiet, highly lucrative transfer of priceless heritage transformed into a devastating physical humiliation. What looked like a routine security checkpoint was actually the execution of a forensic asset lockdown, permanently severing her access to the sovereign vaults. What Camilla just realized as she watched those trucks being forcefully turned around is that she cannot siphon the wealth of the crown. And against the unyielding property laws of the bloodline she actually owns, absolutely nothing. In this video, we are going to unpack the secret. Desperate wealth transfer Camilla attempted under the cover of the king's ongoing health vulnerabilities. We will examine how she tried to weaponize the Royal Collection Trust, attempting to move priceless artifacts into the private estates of her non-royal children under the guise of long-term loans. We will look at exactly how Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the logistical paper trail of her staggering exploitation. And we will break down the silent administrative guillotine that physically blocked her maneuver. By the end of this analysis, you will understand how the most ruthless royal retaliations are executed not with public outrage, but with the quiet, devastating enforcement of an inventory audit. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this structural collapse, one must first dismantle the towering illusion of absolute supremacy Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously constructing. For 30 years, she operated with a singular, unyielding focus, navigating her way from the deep shadows of public scandal to the center of the royal palaces. But her ultimate psychological objective was never merely about public acceptance. It was about achieving permanent, undeniable, institutional security. Over the decades, we witnessed what appeared to be the systematic erasure of Princess Diana's legacy through the subtle rewriting of palace history, the replacement of loyalist staff, and the aggressive push to elevate her own non-royal family into the permanent fabric of the state. Camilla operated under the profound, unwavering belief that because she held total control over the heart and decisions of King Charles, she inherently wielded the executive authority of the crown's vast material wealth. She treated the king's personal devotion as a blank check for absolute power. Throughout the past several years, she navigated her elevated position with a staggering level of confidence, wandering the halls of the royal residences not as a custodian of history, but as an owner. She built an empire of influence surrounded by an expensive public relations apparatus that convinced her the public had forgotten the past, and that the institution's priceless artifacts were finally hers to distribute. She felt completely secure in her position, completely failing to notice that the true architectural guardianship of the monarchy had already shifted away from her husband. The trigger for this unprecedented internal war occurred as the palace began navigating the quiet, highly classified logistical transitions of the new reign. Recognizing the inherent fragility of her position as a consort, and facing the stark reality of the king's ongoing health crisis, Camilla was gripped by a sophisticated form of commercial and historical desperation. She knew that her access to the grand palaces, the sovereign wealth, and the irreplaceable art collections was tied entirely to the lifetime of King Charles. Driven by this panic, Camilla attempted a breathtaking secret administrative maneuver designed to siphon significant institutional wealth into her private bloodline before the window of opportunity slammed shut. Behind closed doors, she quietly directed her private office to draft a series of complex logistical requests directed at the Royal Collection Trust, the charity responsible for the care of the royal family's priceless art and antiquities. The paperwork revealed an orchestrated attempt to initiate long-term indefinite loans of highly valuable historic paintings, rare tapestries, and antique furnishings. But these priceless assets were not destined for public museums or state galleries. They were slated to be permanently transferred to the private non-royal estates of her children, Tom and Laura. It was a calculated, hostile takeover of the crown's heritage. Camilla was attempting to use the cover of routine palace redecoration to execute a massive untraceable wealth transfer, ensuring that even after Charles was gone, her family would possess independent, untouchable commercial assets masquerading as borrowed decor. She fundamentally believed that her signature as queen consort was enough to bypass the strict curatorial governance of the institution, assuming that the physical wealth of the monarchy was simply another perk of her marriage. What Camilla did not anticipate was that the administrative machinery she was attempting to manipulate was fiercely protected by the ultimate gatekeepers of the crown. While she was busy executing her strategy through the household transport offices, Prince William was quietly protecting the perimeter. When William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall and assumed his role as the Prince of Wales, he also assumed a profound overarching responsibility for the long-term preservation of the sovereign's heritage. William is a man who carries the silent, enduring grief of his mother's public humiliation, coupled with a fierce, unwavering instinct to protect the future of the crown for his wife, Catherine, and their children. When Camilla's unauthorized loan applications bypassed the standard curatorial committees and were routed for final logistical dispatch, they triggered an immediate, highly classified audit. The paperwork landed squarely in the operational view of Prince William and Princess Anne. Anne, who possesses a terrifyingly precise knowledge of royal inventories and property boundaries, immediately recognized the staggering exploitation hidden within the loan agreements. Together, William and Anne conducted a silent forensic review of the Royal Collection Trust's pending manifests. They uncovered the extensive metadata trail of her requests, identifying exactly which sovereign assets Camilla was attempting to quietly remove from the royal vaults. They saw the empty spaces she intended to leave on the gallery walls and the precise, calculated attempt to enrich her private family using the sacred artifacts of the state. The moral outrage was absolute. For William, who has watched his wife Catherine champion the preservation of British history with uncomplaining sacrifice and flawless grace, Camilla's attempt to artificially manufacture a heritage for her stepfamily crossed an unforgivable red line. But in the upper echelons of the British monarchy, you do not retaliate with emotional screaming matches or leaked tabloid stories. You retaliate with weaponized restraint. The execution of their revenge was completely silent, turning the very bureaucracy Camilla tried to exploit into an inescapable physical quarantine. William did not confront his stepmother in the halls of the palace. He simply utilized his absolute authority over the royal estate's operational frameworks to enact a devastating institutional strike. A new internal mandate, quietly referred to by insiders as the Forensic Inventory Directive, was immediately circulated to the Royal Collection Trust and the estate security details. The retaliation culminated on a quiet Tuesday morning as Camilla's logistical team attempted to execute the final phase of the wealth transfer. A fleet of climate-controlled art transport trucks arrived at the loading bays of Buckingham Palace, ready to securely pack and transport the requested artifacts to the private Parker Bowles estates. But as the vehicles prepared to load the crates, the traps snapped shut with breathtaking speed. The transport teams were abruptly halted by a specialized division of estate security acting under the direct orders of the Prince of Wales. There were no flashing cameras, and there was no dramatic public scene. There was only the devastating reality of a physical blockade. The security teams had been issued strict, unyielding directives. The outgoing assets were unauthorized for civilian transfer. The transport personnel were informed that the long-term loans had not been validated by the overarching trust governance, and they were ordered to immediately return their empty trucks past the perimeter. Simultaneously, a team of royal curators flanked by security moved through the staging areas. They systematically opened the crates Camilla had prepared, meticulously verifying each priceless artifact. Using a specialized administrative protocol, they physically tagged each painting, tapestry, and antique with bright, undeniable markers, designating them as the inviolable property of the crown, completely ineligible for private loan. The massive, lucrative wealth transfer was entirely dismantled in the shadows of the palace loading dock. When the revised manifest was returned to Camilla's private office, every single loan request had been cleanly stamped with an administrative denial. In that suffocating silence surrounded by the physical evidence of her dismantled strategy, Camilla was forced to face the most terrifying truth of all. The billion-dollar public relations machine could not bypass the physical vaults of the monarchy. Stripped of the logistical machinery she thought she controlled, she realized that she does not own the history of the institution. The priceless heritage she sought to claim had been permanently locked away. The grand illusion was instantly shattered. As the panic of total institutional containment set in, Camilla reached for the encrypted telephone, desperate to demand that King Charles intervene. Entirely unaware that the silence waiting for her on the other end of the line would change the reading of everything. The heavy encrypted telephone receiver felt like ice against her ear as the secure line connected to the king's private study. In the echoing, suffocating silence of her isolated office, Camilla presented her grievances with the breathless, practiced urgency of a woman whose entire financial and historical fortress was suddenly in freefall. She laid out the humiliating border rejection at the loading docks, the physical tagging of her carefully packed crates by royal curators, and the devastating administrative blockade orchestrated by Prince William. She demanded an immediate sovereign intervention. She fully expected King Charles to summon the director of the Royal Collection Trust, overrule the Prince of Wales, and reinstate the lucrative long-term art loans she had so carefully mapped out for her non-royal bloodline. For 3 decades, this exact dynamic had been her ultimate safety net. Charles had fractured his relationship with the public, dismantled his marriage to Princess Diana, and absorbed immense global criticism, all to ensure she would one day wield the absolute executive power of a queen. But that is where the narrative shifts completely, not because of a grand dramatic argument, but because of a devastating, unyielding silence. King Charles did not pick up the secure phone to countermand his heir. He did not summon the household legal advisors to draft a royal override. Instead, he met his wife's frantic demands with an exhaustion that carried the absolute weight of the monarchy's physical and constitutional future. The king's silence was not a sign of a husband's indifference. It was the profound, calculated concession of a reigning monarch who had just been forced to face the harsh reality of his own shifting reign. Charles understands what Camilla refuses to accept. The preservation of the House of Windsor no longer depends on the ambitions of the present, but on the unshakable, legally binding material stability of the future, a future entirely managed by Prince William. By refusing to intervene, the king quietly validated the logistical guillotine that William and Princess Anne had dropped. He signalled to the entire palace apparatus that the true governing authority over the sovereign vaults, the priceless art collections and the physical integrity of the institution had already transitioned to the Prince of Wales. Intervening to protect Camilla's private wealth transfer now would mean declaring a public institutional war against his own heir, risking a catastrophic scandal that would permanently cheapen the crown's global prestige. In that agonizing quiet room, Charles chose the monarchy over her. He chose the survival of the bloodline. And in doing so, he left Camilla to face the terrifying realization that her ultimate shield had just dissolved. This devastating silence exposes the raw, fragile underbelly of what can only be described as Camilla's profound commercial desperation. To the outside world, she wears the state jewels and occupies the grandest rooms in the kingdom, creating the glittering illusion of absolute power. But the cold economic reality of the British monarchy is that she actually owns absolutely nothing. She holds no independent royal wealth. The vast historical estates, the private palaces, and the multi-billion-dollar sovereign collections do not belong to her. Her frantic attempt to secure indefinite long-term loans of priceless tapestries and antique furnishings for her non-royal network was not a mere interior design project. It was a panicked, calculated maneuver to build a legally binding, state-subsidized material inheritance for her family before the inevitable transition of the crown. A long-term loan from the Royal Collection Trust is essentially an administrative blank check. It guarantees permanent possession of assets that appreciate by millions of pounds. Assets that cannot simply be repossessed on a whim once they are embedded in a private estate. Camilla knew that the moment King Charles is no longer on the throne, her institutional currency drops to absolute zero. She becomes entirely dependent on the financial grace and favor of King William V. Her push to embed her children into the permanent material wealth of the state was born out of a suffocating awareness that her time at the top is strictly finite. William's decision to execute a forensic inventory audit and permanently lock those artifacts in the sovereign vaults was a masterclass in institutional containment. He weaponized the property laws of the state to lay bare her financial vulnerability, revealing that without the explicit approval of the Prince of Wales, her personal empire is completely insolvent. The deeper meaning behind this silent execution of revenge became highly visible in the weeks that followed. The climate-controlled transport trucks being forced to leave the gates of Buckingham Palace empty were not just a logistical failure, they were the ultimate visual representation of an institutional quarantine. The subtle details of this shifting power are now visible to anyone who understands the silent language of the British monarchy. Paintings that Camilla had preemptively removed from the archives, intending to quietly transfer them to her son's estate, were meticulously restored to the main state rooms by royal curators. That detail matters immensely. In the high-stakes game of palace protocol, restoring a painting to its rightful place is a physical decree. It is a psychological signal sent to the wider household that the era of Camilla's behind-the-scenes manipulation is officially over. This is where the story shifts from the cold execution of containment to the undeniable restoration of the true order. As Camilla's borrowed material power evaporated, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, took her rightful place with an effortless, quiet dominance. The contrast between the two women could not have been more stark, and the institution knows exactly who holds the true power. Catherine has never needed to submit unauthorized memorandums to the Royal Collection Trust to secure her family's legacy. She does not need to smuggle priceless artifacts out of the palace in unmarked trucks to project authority or generate wealth. Her power is rooted in uncomplaining sacrifice, flawless execution of duty, and the unshakable legitimacy of the sovereign bloodline. When William ensured that the physical heritage of the monarchy remained untainted by Camilla's private overreach, he was doing more than protecting the sovereign vaults. He was offering a silent, devastating defense of his mother's legacy. For years, William has watched the quiet, systematic attempts to minimize Princess Diana's historical footprint and redistribute the assets she once cherished. By fiercely guarding the royal collection, William guaranteed that the artifacts and history of the crown will be preserved exclusively for the rightful heirs. He ensured that Catherine will one day inherit a pristine, untouched legacy, rather than a depleted archive pillaged by a manufactured shadow court. It was not an act of petty vindictiveness. It was the ultimate silent restoration of order, executed through the undeniable permanence of institutional protocol. Palace courtiers, estate managers, and chief curators possess an exquisite radar for where the true authority lies, and they have already begun shifting their allegiances entirely toward Prince William and Princess Anne. The message has been sent through 1,000 minor logistical updates. Those who align themselves with Camilla's private territorial ambitions will find themselves locked outside the corridors of true power. The boundaries have been permanently redrawn and the vaults have been secured. Ultimately, this extraordinary internal reckoning resonates far beyond the heavy iron gates of Buckingham Palace because it validates a fundamental truth about power and legitimacy. It demonstrates that the ancient organism of the British monarchy cannot be permanently hollowed out by clever public relations, nor can its physical wealth be siphoned through administrative manipulation. The crown protects its assets, its history, and its bloodline at all costs. Camilla believed that by outlasting her critics and securing the title of Queen, she had achieved absolute permanent victory. She thought she had conquered the institution and secured the keys to its ultimate wealth. But she failed to recognize that true royal authority cannot be taken by storm. As she sat in her quiet office, looking at the stamped denial notices that contained her dismantled future, the grand illusion vanished completely. She may still wear the state jewels for now, but everyone inside the palace, and soon everyone in the world knows the truth. The trap has snapped shut. The reign of the Shadow Court has been entirely dismantled, leaving behind only the cold reality of a consort who is merely a temporary guest in a house she sought to rule, and the undeniable truth that the era of Prince William has already begun. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics and physical boundaries of the British monarchy. If you found this forensic analysis compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below with your thoughts on Prince William and Princess Anne's decisive retaliation. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the unspoken truths behind the palace walls.